Good afternoon and welcome to Preparing for the Academic Job Market by jobs.ac.uk, which is an international job board for careers in higher education, as well as being a dedicated career advice source with resources, articles, and webinars, such as this one, to support you on your academic and career journey. We have gathered to discuss this topic and gain insight into academic job seeking. Firstly, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Bahijja Raimi-Abraham. I'm a senior lecturer in pharmaceutics, but I'm going to discuss more and share more about me in the webinar. So we prepared a list of topics and pre-selected questions that our audience submitted before the webinar. If you're watching live today and you'd like to ask questions, please click the Q&A button on the top right-hand side of your Microsoft Teams screen and enter your question. And then there'll also be a chance at the end for additional questions. So, bear with me. We're going to start. So, preparing for the academic job market. Very excited to deliver this today. First and foremost, I will reintroduce myself. So I am a pharmacist, a pharmaceutical scientist, and a podcaster, as well as a founder. If you allow me to give a little overview of my education and career journey, which when putting this together, I was actually quite stunned to see 2003 and us now being in 2025 and seeing how far back my career and education journey goes. So I started things off studying pharmacy 2023, so September 2023. Started pharmacy at the University of East Anglia, and pharmacy at the time, and is still the case now, is 4 years at university. Some institutes have what's called a sandwich course, which makes it 5 years, but it's 4 years at university, a master's program, and then you do your pharmacy training, so called pre-registration year, which is in pharmacy practice, and it's now called foundation year. And so I did mine in hospital and also at Southwark Primary Care Trust, now called Clinical Commissioning Group. And then afterwards, I returned back to UEA to undertake a PhD in an area in pharmaceutics. So pharmaceutics is the science of dosage form design. And at the time, I was specifically working on developing carrier systems. So these were sugar-based carrier systems to protect plasmid DNA. And the idea and the concept of this was to be able to have these systems as dry powder inhaler formulations. Now, prior to all of this, prior to this start of education, pharmacy, I actually wanted to be an actress. I studied drama A-level. I used to, in the summer holidays, get involved in plays and act and so forth. And I don't know if this resonates with people, but I got so caught up in my education and career journey that I almost, dare I say it, forgot a little bit about other things I was interested in. And so during my PhD, I woke up, and then I also got back into acting and auditioned, and also got into some books, extra books, if anybody knows. And so I was an extra in Skyfall. I did some other things as well. If you are trying to find me, I am on the tube scene. If you press pause, you may not see me because the pause icon might cover things. But that was really good. And then afterwards, after getting my PhD, I went traveling. People were asking questions, what do you plan to do after your PhD? And I just couldn't handle. So I went traveling around the West Coast of America and East Coast as well. Then I returned and started a postdoc at UCL. And this was in collaboration with Mechanical Engineering and School of Pharmacy. It was a very interesting project. So exploring the pharmaceutical applications of a device that was designed by colleagues in mechanical engineering. During my postdoc, I did different things. I was invited to give a TEDx talk. I also did some things with the Nuffield Foundation. But this was the start of my entrepreneurial ventures. I founded a social enterprise called STEAM Collective, which aimed to engage the public with STEM research through street art and public art. And that, as I said, was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. I always say I've learned entrepreneurship on the job. And so then years later, 2020, founded my podcast, Monday Science. And then more recently, I have a STEAM agency called Scientifically Speaking, which is, a really the strong passion project of mine. So then let's go back to postdoc. After that, I then went on secondment at the European Medicines Agency, where I was a quality national expert under the geriatric medicines strategy. And then I joined King's College London initially as a senior postdoc for 6 months or 3 months. I should know this. I think it was 3 months. And then subsequently got a position as a lecturer. And then in 2023, was it 2024? I should know this, but more recently I was promoted to senior lecturer. And in that time, so my research is in infectious diseases, so solving pharmaceutical challenges with infectious diseases. And I've done a number of things, founded King's College London Fight the Fakes. I have an amazing research team consisting of PhD researchers and assistants. And yeah, it's just many different things that I've done there. And currently I am on secondment at the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, known as NAFDAC in Nigeria. NAFDAC is the regulatory body in Nigeria. And the project I'm sort of undergoing at the moment is regulatory considerations for the role of medicines quality in AMR, antimicrobial resistance. So greetings from Lagos, Nigeria today. And so now that I've given you a whistle-stop tour of my career, I just thought it would be important to kind of introduce myself in that way so you understand my breadth of experience and the angles in which I might bring some of this discussion. So we're going to really get into the academic job market. And it's very encouraging to know that there is appetite and interest in academia by everybody in various different, ages, stages in careers, people who are not currently in academia but want to explore. That's very encouraging. So we're going to talk about the academic job market. What is that? So there are 4 key areas that I've sort of focused on. One is building a strong academic portfolio, navigating the ever-evolving academic landscape, crafting tailored applications, keyword on the tailored. We're going to talk more about what tailoring actually means. And then transitioning from non-academic career roles. So I'm not making an assumption that everybody here is coming from an academic background. And I also want to highlight that being in academia, there are different kinds of people in academia with different backgrounds as well. And as I mentioned, if you do have any questions, click on the Q&A button on the top right-hand side of your Teams screen and enter your question, and I'll read them out afterwards. So I have introduced myself, and yes, it's a virtual, it's a webinar, but I really want to know and understand who you are as well, because that shapes the discussion. So there'll be a link in the chat to access Poll Everywhere. It's all free. So even if you text to join, it's free. So if you go to pollev.com/DA150, or you can use the QR code. So first things first, tell us where you're connecting from. It looks a bit skewed in my screen, but on your platform, it should look, on your phone, it should look normal. This is amazing. I'm actually going to connect as well. Let's put where I am on the map as well. This is amazing to see where you're all connecting from. So greetings, we have South America, we've got Brazil. This is just, I'm very excited to see this. Let me also connect as well, because I forget I am here as well, so I should tell you where I'm all from. Okay, so we've got people from all parts of the world. Let's just try and put my own. That was my one there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is amazing. It's amazing to see where you're all coming from. So firstly, thank you. This lets me know we're all at different time zones. So thank you so much for taking time to connect today. Okay, so the next question, what stage are you in your academic career? So we've got people who are doing their masters, PhDs, postdoctoral researchers as well, mid-career. We've got, okay, we haven't got any we've got mid-senior career academics. We've also got some industry clinical professionals looking to transition. It's brilliant. And so when we're talking about the academic job market, what are your biggest concerns? And there are going to be questions throughout this presentation, actually to support you in strategizing and thinking about your needs and identifying gaps where you might want further support. And also, you know, just to highlight as well, jobs.ac.uk has amazing resources. I've used them throughout my whole career, so it's brilliant to be full circle being in this position to be sharing my knowledge on their platform as well. So a lot of big concerns there is around finding job openings, talk about that, securing funding, writing a strong application, getting visa sponsorship, balancing work-life commitments, and navigating career transition. So again, thank you so much for sharing. So let's talk about the academic job market. Now, I like definitions. I feel it's probably the academic in me. I love a definition. I think definitions make the world go round. So first and foremost, what is academia? I think it's very important that we all start off on this understanding. So as it says there, academia refers to the collective environment of higher education, encompassing students, faculty, and institutions involved in the pursuit of knowledge, research, and teaching. I would also probably add to that innovation as well. But you could argue that knowledge is also, and innovation is also involved in knowledge. So that is academia. Now, whilst I appreciate everybody is from different parts of the world, I have provided examples from a UK perspective that could be adapted, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the international elements. So, for example, this is segment number 1. So this just gives an overview of primary, secondary, and tertiary education, mainly in the UK, but there's similarities globally. So you can see tertiary education is also higher education. You have the general education, you know, GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, master's, PhD, and then you've got the vocational side, which might be BTEC, which is where you might have apprenticeships as well. So academia is really, some people say academia is primarily when we're talking about obviously higher education, so that's tertiary education. And then in the UK, we have different types of universities. So this is again applicable to anywhere in the world in the sense that each country might have a different way in which they group universities. But essentially, and if one of the links could be put in there, I think it's the Times Education, THE, actually, these things, if that could be added into the chat, please. Just giving an overview of the different types of universities. So why this is important and why I wanted to highlight this is because it actually helps you to understand, if you can understand the different types of universities that are available in your country or the countries you're interested in going in, then it helps you to strategize and plan where you apply for jobs. So for example, you have ancient universities, red brick, but if we can group them into 2 very simple categories, which we're going to talk about. If you have a research-focused university, so in the UK, that's typically Russell Group, or if you have a teaching-focused university. And that's very, very important because when you're now trying to go into academia, or if you finished your postdoc, you want to go get a lectureship, you need to have an understanding of how that university is and to know what skills or where the focus, of your role is likely to be. Okay, so when we're again understanding academia, we want to think about the structure. We want to understand what is the structure of academia, because this again is important for you so you know what the career progression is like. right? So where are you looking? So hopefully you can see this, put a laser pointer. So at the top, university, right? Everything's university. So then you have governance and leadership. And this is where people like the chancellor, vice chancellor, the university council, board of governors, academic board, that's where they sit. And then you have your faculties next. So you've kind of got your governance and leadership at the top, then you have the different faculties, and then you've got the schools, and there could be faculties, schools, also known as departments, or it could be faculties, schools, and then within the schools, they're departments. This is the standard structure of universities globally, yeah? But I do think it's important for you to understand maybe in your specific country what that structure is, but it generally is this, and maybe an adaptation of that. And then you have the academic roles. So you've got the governance and leadership roles highlighted there. Then you might have your dean, got the heads of schools. Then you have the program directors for teaching, lecturer, senior lecturer, all those things, people who are delivering either the teaching, delivering the research, right? But you can also, just to highlight, somebody could also be like a pro vice chancellor, but still have their research career as well. And then you have the administrative support and professional services. This is important for you to understand, because the administrative support professional services can also include people who have PhDs. So if I just highlight, for example, let's say the research office, you can have somebody who has been in industry and has an understanding of commercialization and innovation, and then they get a position as in the research office in that sort of area of expertise. And then last but not least, you have the student representation. So there's also student union, course reps, and student council. And again, these are areas where if, let's say, somebody doesn't want to be in a teaching focused role or a research focused role, but they want to be more in a pastoral role, this is an area that they might explore as well. So if we look at academic career paths, as I said, this can be translated to most other institutes globally. So let's just go back one step. So you have here somebody who's done their master's and then gone on to a PhD. So this is a starting point of somebody who has a PhD. And if they wanted to have a research-only career path, they would consider a research associate, so postdoctoral research associate. As I mentioned, I did a postdoc, otherwise known as postdoc. Then a research fellow. Research fellow is when they've maybe secured their own independent funding, like a fellowship or something, 5 years fellowship. That's really meant to set them up to do research. So in this situation, a research fellow, this path, they will not do any teaching. If they do teaching, it will be under the guise of maybe project students or anything like that, if it's lab-based, or even if it's not lab-based, just research, final year students, dissertation, things like that. Then you have another pathway, teaching only. So this could be, again, somebody master's, done their PhD, then they just want to focus on teaching. And there's now also the academic education pathway that's more common. I remember years ago when it was just starting to come out, and it was to acknowledge that there are people who might have their PhDs and so forth, but they're really interested in developing the curriculum, developing themselves in the teaching pathway. So again, you can see similarities in the terms: teaching associate, again, postdoctoral, teaching fellow, blah, blah, blah. And then you can still, if you're going down the teaching route, it's not just you'll be teaching the same thing over time, you're developing and building curricula, you're getting more involved in the actual design and the experience that the students have. And then if you're having a research and teaching role, this is where you have the traditional lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, professor. Those are the titles that are commonly given in the UK setting. And then in America, it's more common to have assistant professor, associate professor, professor. And there are some UK institutes such as UCL who have adopted the American way, if I word that right, but the American three-tier system of assistant professor, associate professor, and prof. So that's general. I'm just conscious of time, so just keep going. So if we're now looking at these two areas here, so this is highlighting that somebody could, after their PhD, go ahead and do a research associate role or a teaching associate role, otherwise known as a postdoc research in the postdoctoral teaching assistant role, and then apply for the lectureship. So for any postdocs in the audience, even if you're doing a research associate or any teaching fellows in the audience, if you are in those roles and then you're thinking, I might want to transition, it's still possible. And to be honest with you, as I hope it might have come through with my own career journey, you can move around. There is a lot of flexibility, and that's one of the amazing things about academia. Okay, so clinical and professional academic career paths. To touch on this briefly, there should be a link coming into the chat now. So if somebody doesn't have a PhD, but they do have clinical or professional experience, there is a pathway for that, an academic pathway, and this is where these individuals would be providing their clinical expertise. So they're like subject matter experts, providing real world experience or insight for the students, but also as it relates to research as well. And I mentioned as well, research focus. So this is for if you the middle pathway, the research and teaching. If you can have your research and teaching pathway, but it might be more focused on research or teaching depending on the institute. So if I speak about myself, I'm at King's College London, that is at Russell Group University. So whilst my role is research and teaching, there's more leaning towards research because I'm on the research and education pathway. Yeah, but then at King's, we also have people who are on the academic education pathway. And then in all of these roles, it's important to be involved in leadership, management, and admin roles that will help with career progression. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So moving swiftly on, if we talk about the academic job market, so a common question that I get asked is, how has the job market changed since or post COVID-19? So the main way it's changed actually has been through technological advancements in research and as well as in teaching, and then also being more interdisciplinary and more international. Those are the three key areas that I would say there's been that change. So if we look at teaching and research, so with teaching, as I said, more digital and hybrid teaching. So yeah, hybrid teaching, even though the more teaching now is in person and on site, but there's more hybrid teaching. AI, could have a whole webinar on AI. And then research-wise, as I mentioned, interdisciplinary collaboration, international collaboration, again, AI, but there's also a bit more focus on research, influence, and impact. So this is like knowledge exchange, public engagement activities. How are we translating? It doesn't matter what sector what field, or whether you're in arts and humanities or STEM. How are you translating your research towards impact, policy change, and educating and providing insight to the community and the public? So now you've got that background and understanding. Excuse me. Now we want to talk about how do you build a strong academic portfolio and how do you tailor your application. So I've put this section into two parts. So this first part is key components for people with an academic background. And when I say an academic background, it could be somebody who's done their master's and PhD, and they are focused on, they've been focused throughout their career on going into academia. Yeah. So somebody who's done, as I said, their master's, PhD, they are either now thinking of doing a postdoc, or they've done a postdoc, or they're thinking of doing a teaching fellow position post PhD. I'm not going to go into this in depth because we don't have time, unfortunately, but I will say that this summarizes the components of what you need to consider. So in everything, you've got to consider the key components, or, in a non-academic environment would be the KPIs, key performance indicators of a job, right? So in academia, the KPIs, the key performance indicators, are related to research, teaching and education, leadership, academic services, knowledge exchange, and public engagement. And then I would say professional development is part of it. That should probably be at the bottom, like the underlying part. And so it's important that you have an understanding of these components and then how you have experience in some, if not all of them, and how you can get some experience in these areas. And so my top tips would be have the understanding of these key components, these areas, excuse me, and then keep your academic portfolio updated. So what I tend to do, although not been so good I was going to say I've not been so good in 2025, but it's only been a month and a bit, so I shouldn't be so harsh on myself. But I generally go through about every 2 to 3 months, I go through the indicators for my role as a senior lecturer, but then I'm wanting to progress. So the next level would be if I was going through that track, or professor. So I always look and see, what am I doing now? And then what do I want to do next, right? And what am I doing to achieve that next part? Then it's very important at every stage in your career, in your academic journey, be clear on your focus. Are you research focused or teaching focused? Doesn't matter which one, but you need to be very clear so that when you're looking at the indicators, you can then say, oh, I'm trying to show more growth or strength in this area versus the other. Show evidence of leadership and academic service, and then showcase any public engagement and knowledge exchange. So we're going to do another poll, and we'll be a bit quick this time because time is going quite quickly because we're having fun, obviously. Okay, so next question. What area of your professional academic portfolio do you feel needs the most for the academic job that you're looking at? So this is for you to self-reflect. Look at what you've put down. It's also reassuring to see maybe other people are experiencing and feeling the same thing. And this is where you can focus and try and work on, okay? Publishing research papers, you're not alone. A lot of people have that. Then next, I think it would be funding and grant applications, excuse me, and then translating your experience, gaining teaching experience, and so forth. Okay. So now let's talk about those who are transitioning from non-academic roles. So again, unfortunately, just because of time, I'm not going to go into this in great depth, but you will notice that the subheadings are different for people who are coming into career changes if you're coming into academia. So the big thing is the fact that you need to highlight in your portfolio what is your industry and professional experience, and how that relates, if you don't have research experience, how that brings everything together. So if you've done any project-based research work or innovation, your problem-solving skills, data analysis, then if you don't have any research experience in a big sense, how do you then show the potential and how you've applied your knowledge, right? So I've put some examples there. And something I should have said, sorry, for also for those with academic things, I'm a big fan of highlighting any awards and recognition you have. So here, industry experience is really important. Even if you don't have teaching experience in academia, show how you have been involved in workshops or training and so forth. But the key thing for those who are changing their careers is to show academic adaptability and transferable skills. So my top tips for you really would be try and work on translating your non-academic experience into academic language. How you can do this is look at job descriptions, and with the job descriptions, look and see what they're asking for and then the experience that you have that could say you've done that. Address any lacks in your portfolio. So as I mentioned, research and publications, which you've already seen in the poll, tends to be a common one. So then with those lacks, how do you turn it around? And don't shy away from saying you don't have publications, you don't have research experience, but you can say, but what I do have is on the ground knowledge of X. I've got real life experience, which is something people sometimes say in academia is lacking, that real world experience. Gain research, teaching, and academic experience. One of the questions that was submitted was about teaching experience, and I will talk about that in more depth after the slides. I really want to get through the slide deck. Showcase engagement and knowledge exchange. Do it. You can see that's something I've put in both for both people with academic background and career changes, because the public engagement and knowledge exchange activities you do shows your individualism. It shows something unique about you. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. I think you're all experts at this now. So this is specifically for those of you who are now thinking about transitioning into academia. So we've gone through the academic portfolio for you. So what's your biggest concern about transitioning into academia from another field? And again, this is for your own self-reflection as well. So, and again, thank you all for just engaging and being so honest with this. So I think the key thing is the academic hiring process. That's a common one. And then no or few publications fitting into academia as well there. Okay. So coming up to the end of the slide deck. So how are we navigating the evolving academic landscape? I chuckle a little bit because even when I was putting together the slide deck, I was like, how am I navigating? And unfortunately, I do think how I'm navigating is burying my head under the sand. It could be that. So don't necessarily follow my process. Let's all learn together as I share maybe how you could navigate, because yeah, it's interesting. So, okay, on the positive, how is the academic landscape evolving? Well, technology, I've highlighted that, increased digitalization. So that's by way of how you deliver the content. Look at us now, this is digital, this is, you know, there. Also with assessments, how that's changing. Digitalization of even in research, like for years, my lab, we don't have physical lab books. We've always used, well, not always, since the pandemic, we started using online lab books. And then that's implemented in some of the, I've added that into some of the courses that lab classes that I run, where I'm like, we don't need online lab books. We're just going to, sorry, we don't need in-person lab books. We're just doing online. So increased digitalization in teaching and in research. Personalized learning. This is a big thing that's coming up. How do we create a personalized learning experience for students? Rise of micro-credentials. So you'd have probably even seen things like Coursera. This became really big during the pandemic. I remember, I don't know if I can say this on the webinar. I'm going to say it anyway, so safe space. There was a time during the pandemic where there was like a list of all these different courses that were available from Harvard, from this and that, and you could do these courses for free. They were all offering that. I think Coursera were offering courses for free. And this concept of micro-credentials, so instead of maybe having to have a 4-year or a 3-year program to get your full qualification, what micro-credentials can be obtained along the way to build a different career portfolio. And then culturally relevant curriculum, so looking at things like decolonization of the curriculum. Are we making sure that the curriculum is culturally relevant? So the not so good things is, sorry, yeah, not so good things is there are redundancies and budget cuts that are ongoing at the moment. Please could 2 of the links be added into the chat? The UK HE shrinking. So this is a link that gives up-to-date insight on redundancies that are going on in academia. And then the second link, which I can't remember what the second link was, but I think it was good. I think it might be an overview of the academic landscape and this, but yeah, you know, unfortunately, there are job cuts and budget shortfalls. It's not happening everywhere, but it's happening to some institutes, and it's something to be mindful of, but not to be scared of. Okay, so coming up to the last question, don't worry, this will be it. So I want to know from what I've said and maybe some other things that you've gained insight, what concerns you the most about this academic landscape? Yeah, job security is a big one, especially I know this is a big thing for a lot of postdocs with fixed term contracts. The competitive nature of academia, publishing expectations, and research demands. These are all valid. So my top tips for navigating the evolving academic landscape is to embrace the change and continuous learning. So, I mean, I've learned how to code. Am I great at it? No. But, change and continuous learning with the time. So if we're doing more things digitally, then I think I'm getting more involved in digital things. I think saying digital things is probably showing that I've not learned that much, but I'm getting more involved. I'm upskilling myself, not necessarily to now say I'm now all about AI, but it might help me to facilitate a collaboration with somebody. It might help how I engage with the students around content and education. Adapt to the increasing competition for academic jobs. There is a lot of competition. And I think it's important to just be aware of that, but don't let that put you off. Technology, we've talked about, develop a collaborative and international mindset. And more importantly, just be yourself. I think being your individual, you're all unique. That is so, so important. You don't need to try and conform. So be yourself. That's the one key thing. Okay, so that's the talk, and please, I hope you've been submitting your questions, and I'm going to pause in a bit to answer them. But I want to just highlight my 3 key take-home messages from everything that I've said. So it's important to build a strong, well-rounded, and personalized academic portfolio. Personalized is important because it's personalized to what you're interested in. Are you wanting to go down the research arm, teaching arm, professional services, admin, student support, all of that? So you can be any kind of academic you want to be. That's why it has to be personalized. Have tailored application, as I said, research, teaching, professional services. That's great. Network, seek mentorship, and also stay resilient. And I think the other thing I should add is be adaptable. And the last thing is please just be yourself. That's the unique selling point in your career progression and journey. So if you'd like to connect with me more, I'm on social media. I mainly use TikTok at the moment. You can, all my social media handles are at Dr Bahijja Raimi-A, or connect on LinkedIn. And then also I churn out newsletters and so forth on this platform called Hensight. Okay, so I'm just trying to see if we have any questions. Let me just go here. Yes, we do. The first question that I would like to just answer from somebody, this was actually quite a common question that was put out, so that was submitted, sorry, is about getting teaching experience. And I learned about this during my postdoc. So irrespective of if you are finishing your PhD or doing postdoc, or you're coming in from academia, a very, very good tip that I learned very early in my career is even if you are not able to get teaching, like classroom teaching experience in higher education, what you can do is deliver seminars and talks, right? So a tip that was given to me was to contact a head of department in any institute that you have an interest in, and then just give an overview of who you are, the expertise you have, and then ask if you can deliver a seminar. And that's a form of experience, right? That's a form of teaching, because you're teaching people about your work and your area of expertise. So I just wanted to highlight that, and that's something that it can be done at any stage and level of your career, and even if you have a PhD, even if you're a non-academic as well. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so a question from Nicole. Nicole, thank you for your question. Are micro-credentials recognized as valid on job applications? That's a very good question. So it will depend on the awarding body. What kind of qualification is it? So for example, if you've done a micro-credential and it was just a certificate of completion, that could go on your CV as skills, right? So if, let's say, you identified you want to gain some leadership skills, LinkedIn Learning is also another platform. You can say you've got because remember, when you're doing your job application, you always want to say, I have this skill set, and then you want to provide proof. That's the best way to structure um, your personal statement or whatever. You say, I have this experience. So I have an experience in, let's say, leadership. And how I've done that is twofold. One, I did this training. I got this LinkedIn Learning course qualification certificate attached. I also have the experience in doing that. So it does depend where you're getting them from. And then also things like, is it a CPD accreditation? So with Scientifically Speaking, we've just recently designed a life sciences career pathway program. And with that, made sure that it's CPD accredited, so that it is a micro credential, but it's CPD accredited, so that gives it more weighting. Okay, let me try and go through the questions. Sorry. Oh, that's Siri getting involved. Okay, clearly Siri has an interest in academic progression. Okay, very good question. Margot Avella, I hope I pronounced that right. It's a very, very interesting question. So I'm not from the UK, and I struggle to understand what they mean by care for the students' pastoral needs. Can you explain what it means and what they expect, please? Thank you very much. A fantastic question. And the reason why this question has stood out to me is because when I was applying for my lectureship, pastoral care came up, and I was like, what does that mean? So pastoral care is, so when you're it's more so when you start your lectureship, you are a personal tutor to undergraduate students and master students. You already have a duty of care for your PhD researchers. You have pastoral care, so that's making sure that the students are, you're like their main signpost. So pastoral care is essentially within, clear boundaries, and there's usually a job description that's provided. Are your ability to care for the student, so by way of signposting them to need, if they have any, maybe they need some resources around accommodation, you can signpost to them. You are available for them to ask you any questions, if you can even give them study tips and guides. So that's what it means by care for the students. It's supporting them, or if I can reframe that a little bit. So I'm a personal tutor to, I think it was at one point 30 students. It's a little bit less now because I'm on secondment. And so my role as their personal tutor is to support their pastoral needs by way of ensuring that they graduate. That's how I see it. So making sure that I'm their first point of contact should they have any issues that they want to discuss, whether it's they need to have a mitigating circumstance or things like that. So that's what that pastoral care means. It's supporting the students to be able to achieve their degree or to achieve what they're trying to achieve. Okay. Oh, why, thank you, Tinsley Lockhart. What agencies for film acting extras do you know of? I will answer this question briefly. Mad Dog is the one that I use, or Casting 2020, I think it's called. So that there. So. Okay, a very good question. This is from Jorge Oritz Moreno. Firstly, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. So do I think it's possible to jump from PhD to lecturer assistant without a postdoc? It's a common question that gets asked. So it depends on the field, the sector or field that you're in. So for some of the sciences, having a postdoc is just expected and essential. However, but for example, in one of the slides I was talking about, if you have like a clinical academic pathway, a professional academic pathway, like a clinical academic pathway, the clinician, not necessarily doctor, may not have a PhD, so they don't necessarily do a postdoc, right? So it really does depend, but it is possible to go from PhD to lecturer / assistant professor without a postdoc, but it depends on the field, your area of research or topic. It also depends on the institute. So some institutes may have a position that's advertised as a lecturer or assistant professor role that is essentially a postdoc, but maybe because it's more teaching focused, they give it that lecturer, or maybe, sorry, not essentially a postdoc, essentially a teaching fellow role. But just by the structure of the institute, they're happy to take somebody in that's a PhD because it might be more teaching focused. I hope that sort of explains that. Let's just think. Yes, there's a question about the resources available on jobs.ac.uk. Would it be possible to maybe put the website in the chat? So I will talk about, so I would say this is from Chi Kang. Thank you for your question. So I would say I would maybe talk about how I've used jobs.ac.uk in the past. So I think you have a look on the website. There's lots of resources, job profiles, job adverts, career advice and resources. How I used job.ac initially many moons ago was looking for jobs. And then I really enjoyed they had a lot of articles around different academic jobs or non-academic jobs. And so for me, at a time where I was trying to work my way through the academic, the career ladder, maybe not so much academic, but just my career, it was quite a lonely thing. I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but it's quite lonely when you are trying to figure out what you want to do with your career. And you may not have in your network, in your circle, a lot of people who are going through the same thing. I did my PhD. I was the first in my friendship circle to do a PhD and my peer group, and even in my cohorts. Yeah, I think there was only one other person actually that did a PhD at the same time. So it was very lonely. And so for me, having jobs.ac.uk was helpful as a resource to gain knowledge without, especially if I didn't have that full network and peer network at the time. So let's just look at more questions. Is it possible? So thank you, Nicole, for your question. Is it possible to apply for postdoc roles with a professional doctorate rather than a PhD, which would be an appropriate level of research role to apply for? Yes, it is possible. I think the clinical academic link would be of strong interest to you. But yes, it is possible to apply for a postdoc with a professional doctorate. And in fact, I think I saw something with a funding call recently. I can't remember where. But actually, it may be that it's not so much a postdoc, but maybe a research fellow role. It depends, but it is possible to do that. So just going through. Thank you again for all these questions. There are many questions that it's a little bit difficult to. I want to answer all of them. Okay, so one question is. Okay. Okay, Julia Abril, thank you for your question. So some older academics say time between finishing PhD and getting a postdoc position is very bad for your CV. In the current job market, how can one minimize this risk? Is this not true anymore? Yeah, so and this also ties in, somebody else asked a question about the number of postdocs you should do beforehand. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the postdoctoral position. And again, people who are transitioning into academia may want to do a research fellow position. If they're wanting to go down the research route, they might want to focus more on the teaching. So a postdoctoral, so if your aim is, I'm trying to make sure I get the wording right for this. If your aim is to be an independent researcher, i.e. have your own research group and so forth, you have to understand what the postdoc is about. The postdoc isn't another training. So this is another thing. There's school of thought that postdoc is not so much now, but it's like no man's land, which is why some people didn't end up doing a postdoc. So the postdoctoral experience is you've got your PhD and now you're gaining more research experience without having to, you know, work towards your PhD. You're publishing, you're going to get involved in grant writing. These are the sort of things that I did. And you're developing yourself as an independent researcher. So as a postdoc in a research group, you will probably have more responsibilities. You'll be involved in PhDs as well. But there's a risk that if you do too many postdocs, and too many is different in every field. So at my time, many moons ago of postdoc, doing too many postdocs, was if you did like 3, you know, whatever duration. The risk that can occur sometimes with postdocs, and the impression it can give, is if somebody has done several postdocs, whilst they would have gained some skills, if they haven't shown how, yes, the postdoc, which is usually the research of the PI, if they haven't shown as a postdoc that they've developed themselves individually and got their own research ideas going on with a plan to go for their own grant or their own fellowship, it can give the impression that the individual is not independent. So that's why advice that is given is saying that, oh, you don't want to leave it too long after your PhD. Don't do too many postdocs. It depends. You'd have to speak with somebody who's in your specific field. And then the other reason why somebody might say, oh, just be mindful of how many postdocs, is because there's a lot of different grants that the eligibility is certain number of years post PhD. So it could also be that maybe some of the opportunities, the grant funding, may not be available, but if the person is still doing a postdoc where they are not independent in a way, it might be a bit challenging. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Yishuan Shi, for your question. So this is, how can I transfer the skills to make up for the lack of publication? That's a very, very good question. So I would say in the first instance, if you don't have publications, it's not the end of the world. If you're coming into academia, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but you'd want to show that. And sorry, it also would depend on what role you're applying for. So if you're applying for a teaching focused role, so if you've got, if I can just give a brief background, a brief scenario. So if you have somebody's a pharmacist, they are clinical, they have clinical expertise, and they want to go into academia and they're interested in a teaching role, they might go for a teaching fellow role that doesn't require publications. It's suggested maybe in your question that you might have an interest in going down a research route. I'm not sure. So it's really important to understand what path you're wanting to go. Yeah. So if now it's somebody who is coming from outside academia and wants to go into a research element, then it would be important to, how do I word this? If they've decided in that moment, I want to go into research, then the question would be, okay, but how has your career built you up into that moment? So if, let's say, you haven't got any publications, then it might be worthwhile looking to write some, to be honest, because if you're going down the research route. And it doesn't have to be a research publication. It could just be like a commentary or a literature review or something like that. So I think it really goes back to what I was saying, like your personal academic portfolio, teaching focused or research focused. We're running out of time. I'm going to try and answer one more question. And then unfortunately we will have to, I should have done the thumbs up, sorry, when I had answered the question. So this is from Kojo. Any advice for someone who has only recently obtained a master's distinction, congratulations, but has 20 years experience in their field? So I would definitely say that the fact that you have your master, again, it will I think the key thing you probably get from me here is it depends on your focus. What are you trying to go for? So I think if you're wanting to get into academia, you've got 20 years experience in your field, the 20 years experience is the big sell, right? So the 20 years experience is where you're really showing, I've got all this knowledge, this expertise, this real world experience that I can give to research or give to student experience. I think it's important to note that there are lots of different programs and courses and centers in various different universities where they are really focused on experience, right, and professional experience. I'm trying not to use too many KCL examples because I want to give you a broader insight. But I think it's important, first and foremost, to note that there are several different okay, you're looking to split time between research and teaching. So it's important to know that there's several different types of centers and jobs where they would want somebody who has experience, and then having the master's, depending on what your master's is in, if it's a taught or research master's, MRes, it will then sort of determine how you can package yourself, essentially. So if you're wanting to go between research and teaching, then it's important to go through the guidance that I gave around academic portfolio with career change. How do you translate or highlight that 20 years of experience in your field to show that you've got some research insight, some teaching, and so forth? Okay, I am going to have to stop there because we are at the end. We've got 4 minutes left. So I want to wrap up. I want to just go back to my key my key take-home messages and really just end on that. Those are my key take-home messages. But I would say the big one is really be yourself. Find a way. It's important to find a way with who you are, what your education experience, your work experience. Find a way to package that to sell you for the role that you want. So let's go back. The recording of this webinar will be available and shared through a follow-up email from the team at jobs.ac.uk and will also be on the career advice section on the jobs.ac.uk website. If you would like to recap on any of the topics covered or share it with your network, please visit jobs.ac.uk and follow them on social media. On behalf of jobs.ac.uk, I'd like to thank you for watching. We hope you found the information shared today useful and helpful. And on a personal note, I want to say thank you for your time and thank you for engaging with the webinar and with the content. So thank you so much.